Today, we're decoding what is honestly a daily magic trick, unpacking the incredibly elegant biological processes that allow you to perceive light, shape, color, and depth. I mean, it feels totally instantaneous, right? You're looking at the screen and boom, the words are just there. But to actually process these letters, it requires an incredibly complex biological relay race, transforming physical light waves into electrical signals your brain can actually understand. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The eye's first defenses. 2. Journey into the eye. 3. Pressure and aqueous humor. 4. The retina and photoreceptors. 5. How we see color. And finally, 6. Depth and binocular vision. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The eye's first defenses. Okay, check out the lacrimal gland sitting right up top there. That's the starting point for our eye's primary defense system. It pumps out the tear film, which washes right across the surface of the eye and drains down through the lacrimal canaliculi and sac. It's basically a relentless, biologically advanced windshield wiper. And let me tell you, this tear film is an absolute multitasker. It doesn't just keep things wet. It actually nourishes the surface, provides this awesome hydrophobic barrier so tears aren't just constantly streaming down your cheeks, washes out debris, and even helps focus incoming light. Plus, it deploys these microscopic bouncers, powerful antimicrobial proteins like lysosyme and immune antibodies like IgA to keep infections totally at bay. Moving on to part 2, journey into the eye. So follow the path of light here. It first pierces through that clear front window, the cornea. Then it slips through the pupil, which is really just an adjustable hole controlled by the iris, and hits the lens. Now the lens acts like a magnifying glass, focusing that light all the way to the back wall, the retina. And notice how this whole delicate setup is locked safely inside a tough, fibrous outer armor. We call that the sclera. You probably know this sclera better as the white of the eye, or if we want to get fancy, the tunica albuginea oculi. You know when you get bloodshot, irritated eyes? Well, what you're actually seeing are tiny blood vessels swelling up and expanding against that usually opaque white sclera. All right, part 3, pressure and aqueous humor. To keep this entire optical structure perfectly shaped so light focuses exactly where it needs to, the eye relies on its very own internal pressure system. It's filled with aqueous humor, which is a nutrient-rich fluid constantly pumped out by the ciliary epithelium. Think of it like a faucet that's continuously filling a biological water balloon, keeping the eye inflated to the absolute perfect pressure. But what happens if that fluid balance gets thrown off? Well, this illustrates it perfectly. On the left, in a normal eye, that fluid flows out through the trabecular meshwork and drains safely away into Schlemm's canal. But look over on the right. If that angle gets closed off or the meshwork gets blocked, the fluid literally has nowhere to go. Because it's still being produced, pressure dangerously builds up inside the eye, which is a huge threat to your vision. Next up, part 4, the retina and photoreceptors. Assuming everything goes smoothly and the path is clear, our traveling little photon finally hits its ultimate target at the back of the eye. Down here in the retina, we find this magnificent, microscopic forest of specialized cells. This right here is where the physics of light literally turns into the biology of vision. The exact millisecond a photon is captured by one of these cells, phototransduction begins. It's a fancy word, but it just means turning light into electrical brain signals. Which brings us to part 5, how we see color. So, how exactly do we interpret a photon as vibrant, brilliant color instead of just some boring black and white landscape? Well, it's all about wavelengths. When white light from the sun, which actually contains all wavelengths, hits something like a red apple, that apple absorbs most of the light and reflects only very specific wavelengths back at you. Being able to sense the difference between those reflected wavelengths, that is the absolute fundamental basis of how we perceive color. To decode all these different wavelengths, our retina relies on 3 distinct photopigments packed inside our cone cells. We've got cones specially tuned for red light at 558 nanometers, green at 531 nanometers, and blue at 420 nanometers. And here's a wild little structural fact for you. The blue-sensitive cones are actually physically smaller than the other 2. Pretty cool, right? This graph perfectly maps out those absorption maximums we just talked about. See the distinct peaks? You've got the short blue wavelengths hitting at 420, the medium greens at 534, and the long reds peaking at 564. Oh, and notice that dashed line peaking around 498 nanometers? Those are the rods. They handle our scotopic vision, better known as our night vision, working right alongside our color-sensing cones. Now let's see how this builds our reality, or in some cases, completely alters it. If someone is missing those green-sensitive cones, they experience a condition known as deuteranopia. Just look at the traffic lights here. Without the ability to detect that middle wavelength, the visual system interprets the world entirely differently. It turns crucial everyday signals into something else entirely. And finally, part 6, depth and binocular vision. Okay, we've captured the light, balanced the eye's pressure, and decoded all the colors. But guess what? The visual system's job isn't done yet. Now, the brain has to step in and add the third dimension. Because your two eyes are set slightly apart on your face, each eye actually gets a slightly different angle and image of the world. We call this difference binocular disparity, and it is the foundational rule for how you perceive depth. The real magic happens when those two separate images travel down the optic nerve and into the brain. Deep in the primary visual cortex, individual neurons miraculously stitch these two completely disparate signals together. This integration creates one unified 3D experience. We call this phenomenon stereopsis. And that brings us to a pretty profound realization. Think about it. Your entire visual world, every vibrant color, the rich depth, the shapes around you, is actually just an interpretation. It's constructed by individual neurons receiving dual signals in the pitch-black space of your visual cortex. It really leaves you wondering just how much of our reality is objectively real and how much is just an incredibly elaborate illusion painted by our own brains. Definitely something to chew on the next time you simply open your eyes. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer. I hope you found it as fascinating as I do.